Hello and welcome. I am so excited to have a very special guest on today. Michelle, thank you so much for coming on to the Made for More podcast.
Thank you, Ali. I'm very excited to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation, so thanks.
Me too. So you and I actually met in real life, probably it was nearly 12 months ago, at a conference. Those were the good old days. But we
Yes.
bonded over some of Brene Brown's work. We're both really passionate about the work that she does. But before we get too far into that, what I would love to know is, where did you come from and where are you going?
Yeah, sure. So where did I come from? So that's quite, I'll try and truncate the the life journey. So my professional journey actually started in the finance world, funnily enough. We've got a similar story there.
We do, yeah.
Yeah, so I was an accountant, trained accountant, and went into an organization and did that for a little while, and then really discovered that numbers just weren't my thing. I couldn't get passionate enough about getting to the zero at the end. I just couldn't get passionate about it. So, and I remember having a couple of conversations with, accountants that I was working with and, saying, yeah, kind of out, but 20% or 20 cents, that's fine, isn't it? And they would have an absolute breakdown about the 20 cents, oh my goodness, it could be that there's this out and that out and da 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 da. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not passionate about this zero enough to be in accounting.
Yeah.
So, but what I was really passionate about and what I really loved was problem solving. So I love the problem solving part of it. And also I really enjoyed the strategic elements of finance. So I was in this organization and I was sort of thinking, oh, this isn't really for me, but where am I going to go? What's next for me? And I was watching the HR manager across the hallway, and she was doing some really cool stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's a bit interesting. And I went, she gets to does the board reports and some of the strategic stuff, just in a different context. And she does problem solving, but it's in a different context. And plus she gets to do all this other really cool stuff. I wonder what that's like. So I decided that I would jump over the fence from finance to people.
You crossed the corridor. Oh dear.
The corridor. That's right. So I started studying in that, and then managed to get a job at one of the universities here. And I got the job in payroll because I figured payroll was almost like that. It's got a foot in both camps. Mm-hmm. It's, a little bit in HR, a little bit in finance. So that was my sort of pathway in. And then, discovered my love for all things people problem solving. I think that's probably awesome. The way it is. Yeah. So that sort of took me through that journey of, some of the more traditional HR stuff, less hiring and firing though, much more in the organizational development area. I was doing a lot of work in that space, and that's where I sort of followed my way through. I did do a stint for 3 years in industrial relations and workplace relations, because I thought that's what I would like, because I was a bit into legal stuff as well, and, that practical element. But I recognized really quickly that when we get the front end right, when we get the leadership right, when we get the skills right, when they get the capabilities and the culture right, the team environment right, then you didn't need that industrial relations stuff as much. Yeah. So, I kind of went, I feel like I'm just slapping Band-Aids on all over the place. And surely there's a way that we can stop all of this from happening. So I took my journey very much into strategic organizational excellence, really, looking at process review and that sort of place. So I kind of dabbled in that for a while, and then went into culture and discovered that actually culture kind of covers everything that I love to do. So I went, that's the space for me. So I really formatted, I guess, my career in the business culture space, which encapsulates all of those other things. It's about what's the structure, it's about what's going on, in the business, and are there efficiencies, are there effectiveness in the process and practice. So I can dabble in that, and it's all about the leaders, and it's about interactions and human behavior and etc. So that's kind of, where I'm at now. So, we've got Synergy IQ, which is our business, and we specialize a lot in culture and helping leaders and transitioning through change, etc. So yeah, that's kind of where I've landed. It's where I've been, where I've landed, where I'm going. That is a constant question in my mind. I still haven't got the answer of what I want to be when I grow up. It's just, I'm still waiting for that, that to come. I think where I have landed though is I'm going to start studying probably next year in anthropology.
Oh, cool. Okay. That's a
Yeah,
different angle. I love it.
Yeah, because I'm very interested in particularly when I'm looking at business culture, I'm really fascinated by group dynamics and how we almost modify our behavior to fit into groups, and why that actually happens, and why one team can have a very different sort of fit in culture to another team within the same organization. So, the anthropological sort of approach is where my curiosity is leading me to now. So I'm going to start studying in that. Yeah. And I think, I'm fascinated as well with the broader society community and, where things like discrimination comes from, and racism and gender inequality. And, so I'm really curious about where all of that comes from, and passionate about trying to find ways of being able to stop it, I guess, in any way I can contribute to stopping it. That's where my curiosity is leading me at the moment.
I love that. I had no idea that that's where you're going. But that is fantastic. And I love something that you said earlier around, what is your real strength is those people problem solving. And I think that is one of the biggest hurdles that we come across today within any organization, is that it always comes back to the people, and the people always come back to the culture, and prevention rather than cure. So prevention rather than cure. So when we can start getting the right behaviors happening, we can set up some systems and processes for all of those people that are within the organizations that are leading teams. It means that rather than slapping band-aids on things, we're able to actually work cohesively as a team, as an organization, and to strive for that real excellence. So I love that that's the focus, and I can't wait to see where the anthropology meets corporate unfolds in years to come, because I think that's a huge that's really interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an area that's not explored as much as it could be. I find a lot of the time when we're talking about culture in workplaces, it's coming very much from a psychological background. And sometimes, obviously, the behavioral sciences comes into that as well, but still from a psychological background, from an individual background. And what we know to be true is that we are influenced by the people around us. And, that's what I'm most curious about, being involved a lot in culture change with organizations. There are definitely levers that you pull that work much better than other levers. And it's like, I really want to just dig into and dig underneath it and figure out exactly why it is that lever works better than the other levers.
Yeah. What are the cogs that are making those levers? I love that. I'm excited. We're going to talk again.
Oh, yes.
A bit later. We'll take that offline.
That's exactly right. Yes. I'm a bit terrified about the time it's going to take to dive into this extra study, but we'll deal with that when it happens.
It's
amazing how you can carve out time, can't you?
Yeah, you'll find some time for what you want to know.
It. Exactly.
So I mentioned when I first introduced you that we have bonded over Brene Brown's work, and tell me about what led you to deep dive into her work, and also your experience so far.
Yeah. So, funnily enough, when I first came across Brene's work, it was back in 2013. So I was sent the YouTube clip of The Power of Vulnerability. So her very famous TED Talk, which I think when I last looked at it, it's up to 49 million views.
It's amazing.
On the TED website. Yeah. So it's, I think, one of the top 3 watched TED Talks of all time. And the elements that she covers in that TED Talk, and for those that haven't watched it, it very much is about, as a individual person, how can we tap into our courage and accept that, part of the process is being vulnerable, and part of the process is a bit gross and horrible, and we just have to sort of work through that. And it was interesting because I watched the clip, and I really liked what she had to say, and I really appreciated her methodology for speaking as well, because she's hilarious and she's such a great storyteller. So I really like, this chick's got it going on,
Yeah, she's
and
very funny.
She's very funny, absolutely. And and the work that she was doing, I'm like, this is so important. Every leader needs this, and we need to be building this into organizations, but not for me. So
It's for those other people with their
for
problems.
all of those other people. That's exactly right, for those people over there. And I think at that time I really did reject the work. Like, I really rejected it for myself, because I was in a position where I was in a very senior human resources role in an organization that was very conservative, and I didn't feel safe to be vulnerable. So I was in a position where I was like, no, that vulnerability absolutely needs to be there, but not for me. Like, I can't do that. I'm a senior HR manager. I can't, just go and be vulnerable all over the place. It's just, they'll eat me alive. So that was very much where I was at that point in time. And interestingly, what she says in the clip is, if you don't do vulnerability, vulnerability does you. And I think by the end of that year, vulnerability had absolutely done me in. And because I was in this organization where I wasn't able to be as authentic as I wanted to be. And I was also engaged in a leadership program that was teaching me to be authentic. So I started turning up as my authentic self, and was challenging some of the status quo. And they didn't like it very much. They wanted the mask wearing, HR manager, Michelle, rather than the true authentic, I'm going to challenge, because like I said, I really loved the people problem solving part of it. So I've always been a challenger, and I call myself a 4-year-old. I ask why all the time, right? And that's just part of who I am. But I recognize that during, some of the last year or so of being in that organization, that I let that part of myself go. Yeah. And then when I started to recapture it again, it wasn't appreciated in the place that I was at. Yeah. So I felt, ostracized, and what I recognize now, and on reflection, I was being bullied, and I didn't recognize it at the time. But it was a real challenging place to be. And of course, I was struggling with my identity and all that sort of stuff. So going on from there, once that had happened, and once that vulnerability did me in.
Thanks, vulnerability. Cheers for that.
Thanks, vulnerability. I'm like, might need to go and reconnect with that talk again, rewatch that again. So I did, and then I picked up Brene's book, The Gifts of Imperfection. That was the one that I read first. And I had quite a profound experience with that book, and it really impacted me, to the point where I was listening to it on Audible, going for a walk one day with tears streaming down my face. People probably thought I was absolutely nuts walking along, but, I was so impacted by what it had to say, because it was describing me to a T, the elements of perfectionism, and the mask that I was wearing, and the protective bubble that I'd put around myself. And it also talks then about, you put a mask and armor around to protect yourself from the negative feelings, you protect yourself from the positive ones as well. So that really just, kicked me in the, where quite substantially. And I thought, okay, I need to explore this a little bit more. So I did. So I really started exploring her work a lot more, and I started to build parts of it into, the leadership conversations I was having, and particularly in the individual coaching, I was like hearing things that people were saying, going, "Ooh, okay, have you thought about this? Have you tried this?" So I really started to dig into it. And then a couple of years later, I had the opportunity to go to a half-day workshop with Brene Brown, counselor here in Adelaide. And I was like, oh yeah, that'd be good. I'll go along. I love her stuff. And we did this trust exercise, where you've probably done this, Ali, where you put the people that you trust in a little square. So it's a square of about 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters. That's the little square. And you write down the names of the people that, are your people, the ones that you can just go to and not think about how you have to turn up. They're just, they're your people.
Yeah.
They're your tribe. Yeah. And, you maybe put 2 to 5 people in this little box because they are the ones that have earned the right to hear your vulnerability stories. And I was sitting in this workshop and I couldn't think of anyone to put in the box. And I sat there and sat there and sat there and just went, what's going on? Like, why? I've got all these great people in my life. Why am I not showing up and being my full self with these people? Like, what the heck is going on? So consequently, that was another one of those kicks. And
what a wake up moment. Amazing.
Oh, it was huge. It was really huge for me. Probably one of the most profound points of, my journey of self-discovery. And I started working with this counselor one-on-one and just digging into some of that stuff so I could really understand where this was all coming from. And, a lot of it had stemmed from, that period of time through the end of that employment, of where I sort of lost my identity and I was trying to rediscover and hadn't quite got there yet, and other stuff obviously that was going on, but I was able to dig into it. So I was like, this is really powerful stuff. So from there, I consumed everything that Brene, produced. And I remember when Dare to Lead was just about to come out.
Yep.
And I put it on order and I'm thinking, this is brilliant. Finally, she's taken all of her work and she's written it for leaders. This is bloody awesome. I can just get into it. So I picked up the book straight away as it came through, consumed, I think 3 times within, 3 weeks.
It's binge worthy for sure. Yeah.
It's definitely binge worthy. And there was so many great things in it where I was like, man, this is exactly how I want to be talking with leaders. Like, this is exactly the kind of material. So I had this thought, because I have, the lazy girl's approach to life. And I was like, so
at your next book?
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. So I kind of had this thought, okay, so I can embed this work into a leadership program I designed myself. But wouldn't it be great if Brene just came out with a leadership program based on this book that I could just go off and learn with her? And funnily enough, the universe, rises up as it does. And I got this email through saying, hey, we're going to do this leadership program. We're going to accredit certain people. If you would like to come along, apply now.
Yeah.
So I went, oh, that's bloody awesome. So I did that. I put my application in, and it was quite an extensive application process. And, you had to pay an upfront fee and all the rest of it non-refundable. I was like, oh, geez, okay, this is intense. And I was really fortunate to be selected, and I got to go to San Antonio, Texas, and hang out with Brene for 3 days and learn directly from her the research that was embedded underneath, and learn the program. And so I think it's been a really interesting long journey with Brene's work, and being able to work through it myself at a personal level first and really connect with the work and know how powerful it really is helps me when I'm now doing Dare to Lead programs, because I know it works. Like, I just know it works. It's not like I'm just rolling out some theory that seems great, or but there's massive amounts of research that sits behind the work that she does, and I've applied it personally and I know it works for me. So it's it's really that powerful work. So that was a very long answer on.
I mean, we could talk about Brene all day long, really, couldn't we?
Absolutely. Yes.
But I think there was a really important lesson here, and this is a really good one for all of our listeners as well. So I come across leaders as well that are struggling with their identity. You mentioned about the armor. I've experienced that myself, where I, literally walked through the door of the office of my team and, suited up, so to speak. Yep. And one of those things that you said was around the trust activity that you did, and you didn't have anyone to put in there. And I think what we need to remember is that if we don't like it, we can change it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because
So
the thing is, when I do that activity now, I have people that I put in that box.
yeah,
And those people that are in my little, square squad, as it's called, um, square squad,
love that.
my square squad, they're the exact same people that were in my life back when I first did that activity. So it's
Yeah.
not like I gathered a bunch of new people to put into the square. It's just that I changed the perspective that I had and
Mhm.
how I was turning up in the relationships, which meant that they became, or at the very least, not necessarily that they became more powerful, but I saw them as more powerful. And I
Yeah.
recognized, the relationship and how important it actually was to me.
Yeah.
So it was a really powerful exercise, and it really did open my eyes to, that opportunity to, change yourself to
Mm.
change your external. And you
Yeah.
hear that all the time, and all the woo-woo experts tell you that, but
Yeah.
until you experience it, you're like, yeah, change myself, change the outside, whatever.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
that was a really, really good experience for me to go, yeah, absolutely, because I changed me from the inside out. I was able to understand myself more,
Yep.
meant that I could actually connect with these people who were already in my life. And it
Yep.
was just recognizing them.
At a much deeper level, and I'm sure you would have brought along you would have brought a few of them along on the journey as well,
Yeah,
of
yeah,
showing up in a vulnerable way and connecting on that deeper level as well.
absolutely. That's exactly right. And I think that's one thing that I've noticed, and I've noticed this with leaders, particularly in organizations, is when they finally do tap into that vulnerability and that acceptance, what I call the acceptance
Mm.
of vulnerability, that's really, I
Hmm.
think, the important part of it. They connect with their people and on a much deeper level, and they provide an environment then where their people can open up more and
Yeah.
they can be more vulnerable, and they actually get more done. They get, because we say that the birthplace of courage is
Mm.
vulnerability. So if we're
Absolutely.
wanting people to step out and challenge the status quo, we're wanting them to be innovative, then they absolutely have to be able to accept that vulnerability is part of that process. And by the leader demonstrating it in action, it provides almost like a permission for
Yep.
everybody else around you to do that. So I found that myself in my personal life, but also, my work life as well. And I see it with leaders that start doing that. And I think that's a really important part of it.
Yeah, yeah. It's not just you. Where the way the waterfall goes is it flows down into your team, and then once it's in your team, then it starts impacting the
Mm-hmm.
organization. So there's some massive,
Absolutely.
amazing work that can happen in that space. And you're right, all from the inside outwards.
Yep.
So one of my favorite things that Brene Brown talks about is around empathy.
Mm.
So can we talk a little bit about that? What does empathy mean to you?
Yes, absolutely. I think with empathy, I've learned a lot more about it since diving into the Dare to Lead work, and I think I'll give you what I thought it was previously. So
Okay.
previously, and because this is a very common thing, I hear it all the time from people, that I thought that empathy was just um, like almost like a sister of sympathy, right? So it was the
Mm,
same kind of thing. I've got to tap into, all the emotional stuff, and I've got to be all soft and fluffy, and I've got to be, I've got to give myself over to somebody else and all this sort of stuff. So I used to say that I didn't have a good level of empathy.
mhm.
And when I recognized what empathy actually was, which the way I define it, and this is how Brene defines it as well, is it's feeling with somebody.
Yep.
So being able to feel with somebody, not feeling the same as them, not, being in the same situation, whatever it is, but it's feeling with them. I
Mm,
recognize that, okay, I actually do that. I
yep.
actually do it. And when it was able to be, I guess, broken down more practically for me, then I was more connected with it. And I find this quite a lot with leaders and organizations, because we all want to be really practical. We want to get stuff done, we want to get on with it. And, do we have time for all this fluffy stuff, as we rudely call it?
Yeah.
But the reality is we've got so much on, and people, particularly leaders that you find in the Western world, they layer cake themselves with so much busy that they don't give themselves the opportunity to actually tap into their human feelings. So empathy is a really interesting one because it works alongside of compassion as well, but they're different things. And when we look at empathy, it really is, I don't have to be in the exact same situation with someone, which is one of the myths around empathy, is I have to have experienced the situation that they're in to feel for them. So if somebody's lost their father, I haven't lost my father, but I have lost. I know the feeling of grief. I know the feeling of loss, and I can tap into that and be with that person in their grief, not in my own. And I think, you know, I often think about empathy as one of those streets that you have to kind of know where the stop signs are. Because
explain that.
Because otherwise, what I see people, and you know, I jokingly call it an overindulged empathy gland. Because there are some
empathy
people that
gland swollen.
Your empathy gland is swollen out of control right now. But what I find is that they over empathize with somebody, or they over identify with someone, and then all of a sudden they're starting to take on the other person's grief, they take on the other person's emotion. They almost get to that point where, like, I have to fix this, I have to do something about it. And I think that's you need to understand that that's their grief, it's not yours. You're not there to fix whatever is, you know, going on with them. You're just there to be with them. So that's where that stop sign gets to. It's like, okay, you know, social distancing, 1.5 meters away, empathy, right? I'm not going to sit on top of you. And, you know, it's really that just be there with them without taking their emotion over from them as well. Because I think that's another thing that we can do without really meaning to. And, you know, it's obviously, it comes from a really good place. We want to be there for somebody, we want to help them. But, you know, Brene calls them the empathy misses. There's a number of, you know, ways that we miss empathy. And one of those ways is trying to fix it. And, you know, the reason that we try and do that is because we're essentially avoiding and pushing away the emotion for ourselves. We don't want to feel it. You know, if you're in grief, that hurts, and it hurts me. I don't want to feel grief. I'll push it away. So what can I do to fix it? You know, rather than just going, you know, I know loss, I'm here with you, I feel it, you know, what can I do for you? You know, and sometimes it's just sit with me. Let's just talk. And, you know, it's really interesting. Have you read the book? It's Sheryl Sandberg and Adam Grant. They've written a book called Plan B.
Oh, no, it's on my
Plan
list.
B or Option B? Might be Option B.
No, I'll add it to my list. Would you recommend it?
Yes, it's actually, it's a brilliant book to look at things like grief and emotion and, you know, and empathy in practice, because there's one element. It was written just after Sheryl Sandberg. So for those that, you know, live in a bubble, Sheryl Sandberg's the COO of Facebook, and her husband died about I think maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, and it was sudden. Like, it was, they were on holiday, and she found him off on the, you know, he'd fallen off the treadmill, he had a heart attack and died instantly.
My
they
goodness.
were in the gym and that sort of thing. So it was a very fit, healthy individual, and unfortunately she lost him really quite quickly. So this book really talks about that process that she was going through. And one of the things that really stood out for me, and I thought was a really, really brilliant empathy in action place, was she turned back up, you know, to work after a period of time. And, you know, she was in meetings and whatnot, and she got to the end of the day and she just felt rotten about the whole day. She felt like she wasn't contributing, her performance was down, it was just awful. And so she spoke to Mark Zuckerberg, who obviously is her manager, direct manager and almost partner in it all. And she said to him, you know, oh man, maybe I should take more time off. You know, I'm just not here. I can't contribute the way I contributed. I just feel like, you know, I feel like crap. And he had said to her, which I thought this was beautiful. he said, I get that it's hard. I really do get that it's hard. And I really appreciate you coming back. And yep, you're probably not 100%, but you actually did contribute in those meetings. You actually gave what you needed to give. And it's okay to feel like you haven't given enough, but you're here. You're here.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it. And if there's anything that I can do to help you through that, but I just want you to know that even though you're not at 100%, you still contributed.
Yeah.
In that.
How important is that as a message from your leader? Oh, so good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I just was like, this is just beautiful. And that's essentially compassion, which is, you know, empathy in action. It's the compassion side of the action. So yeah, it's a good book to have a look at and just really dig into. It's quite, you know, get the tissues.
Gets deep, does it?
It gets kind of deep.
Well, I'll bump it up the list. But I think even that's a really important message for right now, for leaders and for people. We were talking before we started recording around what's happening here in Australia. There are a lot of people doing it really tough, and being able to show some compassion that there is a lot going on for different people at different levels, as a leader, as yourself, and even giving yourself some compassion. You know, we're going through, literally living through history right now, and there is some crazy things going on. So
absolutely.
Yeah,
I think that's really important. Be kind. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, self-compassion is, you know, a skill, I think, in itself. And, you know, I heard somebody say, I can't remember where the quote comes from, but it's essentially, you know, talk to yourself the way you would talk to somebody that you love. And I know that's quite hard for a lot of people. I mean, I've had people break down in tears in workshops when I've actually said that out loud. Because it's such a foreign thing for a lot of people. We just don't treat ourselves with that kindness and compassion. And, you know, and right now it is a really challenging period of time, and everybody's challenged in different ways. You know, and, you know, even people who are doing extraordinarily well through this period of time, you know, the homeschooling kind of people are going, woohoo, this is great. And, you know, the people who provide online video conferencing are going, yep, this is bloody awesome. You know, they're still going through the emotion of, okay, but I can't connect with my family. I can't connect with them in the same way. I can't, you know, I've got guilt even around the fact that I'm doing really well and somebody else is not doing really well. So we're all going through these crazy emotions, and it's almost like a roller coaster ride that everybody's going through, and we're all going through individually and collectively. And I think, you know, this is the crossover between that psychological and the anthropological approach, is that, you know, we go through things individually and we go through them collectively. And, you know, and if there's another period of time that was better demonstration of collective vulnerability, I don't know what it was. Because this is it. Uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. That's essentially the definition of vulnerability. And, you know, this period of time for the entire world appears to, you know, demonstrate that in action.
Yeah, it is amazing, isn't it? So you mentioned just before around empathy is, you know, one of those human feelings, and how it's one of those fluffy skills that, you know, it gets coined. I'm doing inverted commas. What are some of the other soft skills or the fluffy stuff that leaders, you know, it's becoming more and more obvious that these types of skills are more and more useful in your toolkit, and also means that you're being more effective as a leader. So what are some of the other soft skills that leaders need to be learning about?
I think, you know, it's really interesting because the term soft skills, even, I go, you know, these are the hardest skills to learn. The softer, the easy, you know, because if I go soft is easy in my, you know, it's where my brain works. You know, learning how to do Excel, way softer than learning how to have really meaningful conversations with people. So I think one of the critical aspects for every leader and almost every person, you know, if we want to define leader as someone who, you know, who turns up, who really just turns up and does what they need to do. One of the things that's absolutely critical and is done so badly in many workplaces is giving and receiving feedback. It's just as simple as that. And I know that's, you know, feedback is often used as, you know, an F-bomb in most organizations, as soon as you say feedback, people imagine, oh my God, I'm going into a room with somebody for an hour and it's going to be this formalized thing and I need to bring somebody and all this sort of junk. But when I talk about feedback, it's more about that more traditional usage of the word, which is I've done something. How can I know whether I've done it right or not? And how can I then adjust what I've done? And one of those ways is by, providing observational feedback to people that you see.
Yeah.
And really it's about having the skill to give it to a person in a meaningful way rather than just the, criticism or what I call the attaboys, it's like the attaboy kind of
Good
feedback. It's good job. Well done. Pat on the back, that sort of thing. They feel nice, but they're really actually quite
like,
useless.
which bit? What was good?
Yeah,
I don't understand.
exactly.
The whole day?
Tell me more. Yeah, what? Huh?
My outfit? I'm not sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I did my hair today? What are you talking about? Yeah, absolutely. So I think, the better that leaders and people in general can get at really figuring out what was good about what that person did and why it had the impact it did, that's much more beneficial than just going, yeah, good job for getting that project over the line.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. But I'm going to have to now figure out what I did and what I can now replicate into the future rather than, great job for making sure that you held your project team accountable. I noticed that you kept the meetings every week. You work towards the milestones, whatever it is. And because of that, the project was successful.
Yeah.
That's much more meaningful for somebody because, one of our basic human needs is to feel like we're contributing. So if we can actually, as, other humans, whether you're a leader with your team or you're a team member with a peer, if we can actually, dig into that and say, this is what I saw was your contribution and how it helped. That is so powerful for people. And then of course, on the flip opposite, it's, this was your contribution and this is how it helped. And this is how I think that it could be better. If you did this instead, or if you did this more or whatever it is, I think you could be better at this down the track, but feedback has just become one of these really sort of scary words, a bit like performance management. It's the same sort of thing. It's become a scary word in organizations. And I think because of that, it means that people they're not being held accountable the way they need to. They're not getting the feedback that they need to. And some of us, we can't actually see the outcome of our work. I often, if I'm a carpenter and I've got a piece of wood and a nail and a hammer and I nail that piece of wood to the wall, that's feedback, right? And it stays there, that's feedback. If it falls off, that's feedback. But we don't often get to see that, particularly if we're in knowledge work roles. So observational feedback is really important in that, because we might not see the telephone call that we've just had with one of our customers and we've solved their problem. We might not see the outcome of the problem being solved. So we have to get that observational feedback of the way you handled that conversation is so important. So I think, if leaders and managers, we'll just pick on them for now. If leaders and managers,
it's all on you.
We'll just pick on you for now. Could get that skill and do it well. Then that would change organizations across the board, because then their team members are learning about how to provide feedback, how to get feedback. The other flip opposite of that, and a skill I think that, because we quite often talk about this is how to provide, information and feedback back to people. We don't teach people how to receive feedback though.
That's right. How often do you give someone even a compliment? They're like, oh, no, that's,
you
need to receive this.
Yes, absolutely. They're the way, get lost.
Don't tell me nice things.
Don't tell me nice things. Oh my gosh, but we, a way that I talk to leaders about receiving feedback, because, I've got to, I don't want to insult any of my HR cronies, but, there's a few of us in HR from the past have gone, okay, you're doing your performance management conversations, you need to ask for feedback. But we don't go on to actually how to do that. So I quite often find, managers, I'll say to them, or leaders, do you ask feedback, or how do you ask for feedback? Oh, yes. In our performance conversations, I'll say, do you have any feedback for me?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, how does that go for you? It's like, oh, most of the time they just don't give me anything, or they don't, I'm like, is
really?
it any,
Oh, that's
really?
so weird. Yeah.
So surprised. I'm so surprised. But it's really, if they can learn how to set up the environment and be a lot more specific in that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm trying to get better at my email communication. And last week I sent out one that was, succinct. What did you think about that? Can you give me some feedback on my email communication?
Yeah.
People will be more likely to go, oh, okay, yep, I'll talk to you about that. Because it's very specific. Whereas that broad question of, can you give me some feedback?
Yep.
It's too broad for people to, narrow their thinking into one space and come up with something meaningful on the spot.
Yeah.
So I think if we can teach both skills, then we're going to be having much more meaningful outputs and conversations and productivity and better performance overall.
That's right. So I talk to leaders a lot, leaders and managers who focus on them again around giving and receiving feedback. And one of my, I guess one of the lessons I teach those people is, what is it like, what kind of behavior or action or activity do you want your teams to replicate? Like, what do you want them to do again? What did they do really well that you want them to do again? Like, that's what you're giving feedback on. And I think that's one of those mindset shifts where they go, oh, actually, this is the exact thing that I want them to keep doing. And if we have that generous assumption that people are trying to do the right thing and want to do the right thing, and then we're also reinforcing that by saying, this was really good, just like keep doing that over and over again, or the next time, it also means that you can be more productive as a manager or as a leader. You're spending a lot less time micromanaging or even performance managing, because people know where they need to focus their energy.
Oh, totally. I completely agree with you. And I think that, reinforcement feedback stuff or conversations that we can have is so much more important. And there's lots of research that is being done, particularly in children now rather than adults. But a lot of research has been done in how to get children to behave the way you want them to behave, etc., or behave within society norms, etc. And it's all about reinforcement. Catch them in the act of doing something really great and reinforce that. But we don't tend to do that a lot in workplaces. I think we forget that adults are actually just big children.
Yeah.
They're just big children.
Yeah.
We grow and learn and develop the same way. It's quite interesting. I think, I don't know where our brains go in that circumstance, but it's really interesting.
We just get better at hiding the emotions. I think, as you know, I've got 4 young kids, and I always joke when I'm working with my leaders, particularly in a group setting, that it's so easy to see the behavior in children in adults now that I've got some of my own examples at home. So they, wear their emotions, all over their whole body, and you can see the same things happening in adults now. We just get better at hiding it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I reckon that's a really good way of thinking about it, because we put that mask on, we put that armor on, we put, whatever we need to. And if we're all armoring up, then obviously we're not able to have the kind of conversations we'd like to have. Yep. I mean, that is the beauty, I got to say, of kids, when you see them, even when they're in those moments of tantrum, and it's just, you think, whoa, when it's your child, it's atrocious. When it's somebody else's child, it's,
it's better when it's someone else's child, you're right.
Much better, you can just observe it from a distance and go, oh, that poor little soul,
Yeah.
But, I used to say when my kids were little, it's, they've got these big emotions and a tiny little body to contain them in. So is it any wonder that they explode out of that?
Yeah.
And that's, if we're looking at, leadership and workforces into the future, we need to start with the children that will eventually be into the future, in the workplaces. Because I remember years ago when my kids were going, what is it that you actually do, Mum, for a job? Like, what do you do?
I'm changing lives.
Yeah, this is right. This is particularly when I'm sort of, I've got my training kit with all, I've got teddy bears in there, and I've got balls, and I've got Play-Doh, and I've got all sorts of stuff.
Yours is good. Yeah.
What do you actually do for a job? And, they were little, and I was thinking to myself, okay, how do I explain it to them in a way that they're going to understand it? And I said, oh, well, actually, I teach adults how to behave themselves at work. And
that's gold. That's
yes,
so
and I remember
true.
my daughter saying to me, she's like, "Oh, that's just like a teacher at school." And I'm like,
Mm.
essentially, yeah, it's a very similar thing, but it's just how can we interact in a better way? But it is really about teaching, teaching adults to behave better at work. That's really what it's
So
all
good.
about. And I do find that sometimes I think, oh man, I feel like I'm teaching people to do stuff that shouldn't their mum have done this when they were little?
Sometimes you need that extra reinforcement.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
so what would be your top 5 tips for any of those new emerging up and coming leaders and even business owners as well? So what's your top 5?
Yeah, well, I think the one that I often say, I think is just fundamental, is just be human first. Like,
Yes.
be human before you're anything else. So be
Yeah.
human before you're an accountant. Be human before you're a change manager. Be human before you're a CEO. Like, just be human first.
Yeah.
And then tap into that. Like, what does that mean? How would you prefer to get information? Do you want information about how you're going or how you're not going? Well, most people say yes,
Yeah.
they do. So tap into your humanness and remember that the other person is just a human too. And we're all fallible. We've all got fallibilities, and we're not always at 100% performance or, pulled together every day. There's days where I go, oh man, I should not turn up anywhere because, I'm just not in a fit state to be,
It's an audio only kind of Zoom
it's an
day.
audio only kind of day. That's exactly right. Or it's maybe I should just pull the doona back over my head and just pretend that life isn't here right now. I'm just not fit for humans. But I think recognizing those things in ourselves and others as well, that is really important. Which probably brings me to the second one, which is about understanding the differences in people. That's, I think, is fundamental. And I see so often people judging others from their own paradigm.
Yes.
I've quite often had debates around the term common sense. They just don't have any common sense. And can you teach common sense? I'm like, well, what is common sense? So what is common to you and your upbringing and your family and your culture is not common to other people's families, upbringing, culture, and the way in which they do things. So common sense is not common. It's not a common thing. And it's almost, I find that when people say, oh, they should just have some common sense, it actually is coming from a really exclusive, non-diverse place. It's almost like they've closed down their thinking into this really closed off judgmental place. And it's, you might as well say, why can't you act exactly the way I act and turn up all the time?
But I'm not going to tell you that.
But I'm not going to tell you that because I'm just going to use this term common sense, inverted commas. So it's really about tapping into and understanding each other, and that people are very different. Just the baseline of extroversion, introversion. And I don't know about you, but I've noticed the extremes of that through this, particularly the lockdown period of COVID. You saw the extroverts, they're like scratching at the walls, trying to get out and trying to get to people and creating all these Zoom parties and all the rest of it to just have that interaction. And then the introverts, and I'm an introvert, so I can speak with authority about introverts. Happy to be at home. It's like locking down, not going out this weekend. Okay, work from home. Okay, sounds great to me. All of a sudden I've got focus time and energy. So just those kind of differences in how people turn up, the backgrounds that we have, the cultures that we have, we didn't all grow up the same way. We don't all have
conditioning.
Absolutely. We don't have the same definitions of respect. We don't have the same definitions of collaboration. We don't have the same definitions of whatever else. We just don't have the same definitions. And I think that's a really important thing. And for me, that's almost a fundamental element to it. Probably, I'm just having a look at my notes here to see what else I'd written down there. Holding people accountable. That's another one. And the reason I say that is because I see it missing so often. And without I think without a word of a lie, every single conversation I have with an organization about leadership programming or values or culture, whatever it is, and I'll ask them, what would you like to, your people to learn? What would you like to see more of? Accountability.
Yeah.
Either self-accountability or holding others accountable.
Yep.
And I think this one goes back to that feeling of, that feedback is something, some sort of dirty word, or performance management is scary and we can't go into that. And it's like, well, my role is to actually make sure that you are able to do your job in the best possible way you can do it.
Yep.
And I'm going to hold you accountable to that. So if you promise me that you're going to do something on Thursday, it's not mean to say, hey, you haven't delivered that thing on Thursday. We need to have a talk about why that happened.
Yeah.
That's not mean.
No, that's doing your job. Yeah.
That's doing your job. That's right. And it doesn't have to be a criticism. It can just be a conversation, but we still have to hold people accountable. People make decisions. We are allowed to hold them accountable for those decisions that they make, and it doesn't mean that you don't understand the decision. I had a client earlier this week cancel a half-day workshop last minute.
Oh,
and
no.
I know. But I completely understood what was going on, because they've got a lot on in their workplace. Understand that, and I held him accountable for it. Let's talk about how we can, not do this in the future. This seems to be a bit of a pattern that's developing. What's going on there? How can we help so that this doesn't have to happen into the future? This is the impact of what that on your program as well as on our time. So, it's not mean to hold people accountable. It's just part of your job.
Yep.
Part of your job. Yeah. And I think one of the other ones, so what are we up to? That's number three?
That was number 3. Yep.
That's number 3. Okay. Number 4 then would be about acknowledging fears and feelings.
Oh,
in the
that
workplace.
Is a beauty. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And we do a lot of work through change, and we find that, one of the things that we don't see a lot of is people actually acknowledging that, what, we're changing something. That means I have to let go of something, which means I'm going through grief.
Yep.
It might not look the same as grief that is expressed at a funeral, but it's still grief. It's still, I have to let go of something. I actually have to accept that I'm not going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And I haven't quite come to terms with the benefit of doing ABC instead, you know? So really acknowledging those fears and feelings is essential. Yeah. People going through their career changes in life as well. I've just gone into a new job, I've just started doing a new project. I've just taken on a new type of role. It's terrifying to do that, because you think, oh my God, what's going to happen? Particularly if you've got a blame culture in place as well, which a lot of organizations do. So, having that fear, having the fear of just not doing a process that seems stupid, and it's like, well, am I going to challenge that? No, I'm not. I'm just going to do the stupid process instead.
Yeah. It's just the way we do things. Yeah.
It is.
We've always done it that way. It's just our way.
Totally. That's exactly right.
Way
so being able to that's right. It's the stupid way that we do it, but we're doing it. We're going to continue doing the stupid. But just being able to acknowledge that everybody's got these fears and these feelings. And I think one of the things that Brene says when she's talking about shame particularly is we all have it. And if we don't have it, so the only people that don't have these kind of feelings are sociopaths. So it's either have the feeling, accept and acknowledge that you've got the feeling, or accept that you're a sociopath. So, which one do you actually want?
Which one do you want? That is a good life lesson.
Do you want? That's right. It's like, do I want to be a sociopath? No, I don't. So therefore, I'm going to have to acknowledge that, I'm human and we have feelings, and others do too. And if somebody's throwing a tantrum in the workplace, it's because they have feelings, big feelings, little body.
And they're not sure how to get them out before they can bust.
That's right. Absolutely. I think just a side note on that one as well, because one of the things that, because we do talk about these fears and feelings, and you talk about them a lot in your work as well.
Yeah.
Is the manager having the misunderstanding that they have to fix the fears and feelings.
Oh, yes.
almost have to be a counselor for people. It's like, I don't understand what to do. You know, what if they're crying, etc. And that for me just goes right back to that conversation we had about empathy. It's about tapping into empathy and being there for them. It's not about fixing their problems. And if it gets to a point where you go, whew, this is a bit much for me, is also acknowledging that this is too much for me. And here's a support mechanism that you can go to that where you can actually explore that further. But I think there's a bit of a fear in managers that if I start talking about feelings, then I'm going to get to a place where I don't have the skills to be able to deal with it. You don't have to deal with it. And I think that message can get out to managers. You are not a counselor, and there's no expectation that you're going to be a counselor. But the expectation is that you empathize with the person and you support them to go get some help if they need help. That's really the job.
Yep, totally agree. So one of the biggest fears of the leaders that I talk with around courageous conversations is that someone's going to cry. And I'm like, here you go. They are more than likely going to cry. Like, just get that over with to start with, and just make sure the environment's set up so that when they are crying, that you're able to show compassion, show empathy, have tissues on hand, because it's going to happen. Expect that it's going to happen. And it's a beautiful release for some people to be able to have all that pent up emotion. You know, what did you say? Big emotions, little bodies. We have these big emotions, and one of the best ways that we can release them is by crying. And then that's when we can sort of, you know, get over the gap and bridge the gap into the next stage.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you find that's a gender thing as well, that men are much more fearful about that than women?
I haven't found that to be true yet. I also haven't looked into it that way either. But there could be something behind that. It's worth looking into. I mean, probably also on the reverse as well. I've had female leaders who are worried about the men that cry and not sure what to do in that instance as well. So I think we probably just as a society have a fear of crying, making someone cry, or people crying in front of us and not knowing how to support them through that way.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. And it's almost like, I know I heard you just said make someone cry. And I think, you know, it's interesting. I think that's the fear. That is that we have made someone cry. And it's like, no, they are crying.
And you happen
because
to be
of this. You happen to be there. The circumstances or whatever, and the words and how they've processed it is, you know, making them cry.
That's their own stuff.
Yeah, that's right. So it's really interesting. I do wonder about the crossing the gender divide, whether that is, you know, part of it. Because I had a conversation, I've had a few of them with male managers, particularly, where they're like, oh, I've tried to have, you know, conversations and performance management conversations with this female employee, but then she'll cry, and then we just like close down the meeting, and then, you know, it's a month later and she's still not doing what she needs to do. So we have another meeting, and then she cries, and we close down the meeting, and, you know, and it's, you know, I had the same conversation. She's going to cry. Probably just part of her process.
And I wonder if that's more to do, and we're going completely off topic, around gender gap and what's the proportion of males in a leadership role that are having to have those conversations versus, you know, there'd be so many different aspects and variables to which cohort we're talking about. But
totally. I think that's a really big subject matter as well, in that, you know, that it's part of the process. Acknowledge fears and feelings. It's just part of the process.
I love that. So good.
And then I think have I got one more?
Lucky last, number 5.
Lucky last. Okay, so this is probably the important one, particularly right now. It's as a leader, as a manager, you need to take time for you.
Oh, yeah.
You need to be self-compassionate. You need to develop your own resilience. And the way I often think about this myself, because I'm very visual, is that if I've got an empty cup because I haven't refilled my water cup, and somebody thirsty comes to me, I've got nothing to give them.
That's right.
Nothing to give. I've got nothing to give myself, but I've got nothing to give others. And the reason that visually comes to me is because a lot of the time I find when I say to somebody, and look, I'm a fantastic advocate for self-care. I'm a shocking role model. So just putting that out there. But when we have conversations around this, you know, developing your own self-care and resilience and filling up your own water cup first, a lot of the time it's, oh no, I don't have the time because I'm serving somebody else, or I'm doing for my children, or I'm, you know, doing for my wife, partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. This is, I'm giving. I've got my clients, I've got my, I can't give to myself. So, when I think about it that way, because I fall into that trap a little bit myself sometimes, in that if I don't refill my cup, when that thirsty person comes to me, I've got nothing for them. So I have to have my cup at least have a little bit in it so that I do have something to give.
Yeah. I was working with a relatively new leader recently, and he was like, how am I meant to do all of my like business as usual stuff and have empathy and be supportive and come up with performance development plans and do this? And, my staff really need me right now and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, are you doing anything for yourself? And he's like, I don't have time for that. I'm like, okay, all right, let's just, we'll work backwards here. And what you really need to be looking at is where there's some time where you can actually refill your own cup. Exactly the same idea, because you're going to be useless to your team in a few weeks if you don't turn that around. And he was like, are you sure? I'm like, yes, I am sure that this is an important one for right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really interesting as well, because I hear that quite a bit too. And it's almost like these, the feelings are something separate from the action of work.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, actually you're doing your work. You're just overlaying it with this different way of talking. Instead of going, go forth and do, you're, hey, have you thought of? It's just flipping language, flipping thinking, etc., and building it into your day-to-day activities rather than having it completely separate from. Such an interesting concept.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you so much for coming on today, Michelle. I've absolutely loved chatting with you, and I know that you and I could do this for the whole day, and I'm sure at one stage in the future we probably will. But where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can get onto synergyiq, all one word, .com.au. That's our website, and there's contact us, emails, etc. I hang out on Instagram and also on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. So just look for Michelle T. Holland. If you put Michelle T. Holland, it'll come up straight away.
Awesome.
That's my author name. So
your author name. We'll put the links to your books as well in the show notes.
That would be great. Yes. Thank you for that. So connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on there more than I'm anywhere else.
Yeah.
On LinkedIn. But Instagram is what's my Instagram? I think it's at Michelle T. Holland as well.
I don't think I follow you on Instagram. I'll have to sort that out.
There you go.
There we go. Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing so much of your wisdom. I've absolutely loved this, and I'm sure leaders who are listening, and even anyone who is listening, is going to get so many valuable takeaways from this episode. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Ali. And I would say the same for you as well. I mean, the courageous conversations that you have with people, as well as help them to have with others, is so critical in today's society. So well done. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. We'll conquer the world together.